Hello and welcome to another review here on the channel. Today we will be having a deep dive into Season 13, Episode 4 of Death in Paradise. Now, for anyone who has been watching my reviews on this series, I have unfortunately had to miss a review for Season 13, Episode 3, because unfortunately that came out last week while I was away. Alright, so let's dive right in. Starting straight off with a proposition. If you really want me to do a review of Season 13, Episode 3, I will do it, but only if this video gets 100 likes. So we'll see how that goes. Alright. So then, to dive straight on in, my camera is at like entirely the wrong angle. That's better. Anyway, let's start with the views of the island from the drone shot. As always, look incredible and I love them. The electronic repair shop is a really nice location. I think it's been well built and I really would like to see locations like this in the future. The proposal was well put together and does add a nice plot thread throughout the episode. And for someone like me who watches this show a lot, it's a very different one as well. The party was also well put together, the engagement party. It does feel a little bit rushed though. It does feel like it's just been thrown in there just to tie the story together. I don't know whether that's a problem on the writing side or what, I just don't know. I think it's more of a me issue than anything else. The island-wide blackout was well made and well put together, and it does add a really great storyline for the whole episode. Yeah. The electrical thief was a very good storyline throughout the whole episode, and it's something that we don't really get to see very often, and it's something that I really quite enjoyed. It's a very different one, I know, but it's always nice to have different things within a show that's always the same. And obviously my stand looks like it's going to fall off, but it's always obvious to go with the same things because of the whole saying, if it's not broke, don't fix it. But in this case, they are trying new things, and that's good. For something that's been going for 13 seasons, it really does just need to keep pushing forward. Yes, I have a pink pen. I didn't have another one available. Thank you. Before everyone starts spamming in the comments, why do you have a pink pen? Honestly. Yeah. Marlon has truly come a long way when we consider his story, because for those of you who potentially haven't been watching the show for very long, potentially only joining, say, last season or the season before, Marlon was originally a criminal himself and got a job in season 10, maybe? I'll have a look now. But he got a job on as a police officer as a way to get him out of crime. And he's come a long way because he used to be very laid back, very I don't want to do work kind of person. And now he's asking for work in this episode, and he puts in so much effort, and it's really nice to watch. Especially when we consider the fact that before this, he was a criminal, and you know, that's something we don't really get to see very often. Yeah, I'll just try and find that for you. He joined in either season 9 or season 10. I think he must have joined in season 10. Yeah, because he joined alongside Florence in season 10, who it's kind of my favourite character. I really want Florence to come back. I'm really hoping that Florence comes back. Anyway, please, I beg so much, just don't kill her off. Please, if you're going to bring her back, do not kill her off. I know there's no way there's someone from the BBC watching this, but, you know. Anyway, yeah, so we've done that. Someone coming to work is very good for his character, because obviously Selwyn is a lovely character. He's a lovely character to watch. However, watching Selwyn's character progress throughout the seasons is very, very difficult to see character progression because he is just iconic. You don't have to go through the seasons all like, well, what are you doing? Because he's just iconic and he is the character that we all aspire to be, really. As always, in this story, we discover some form of argument. The argument in this one was a very weak one, but I always like an argument between the victim and a potential suspect, even if the victim is not necessarily one of us. Even if the victim isn't necessarily having a proper argument about something like money, sex, drugs, whatever, it doesn't matter. Love is a very common one, but in this one, it's just a very basic one about everything and nothing at once. The cryptocurrency was very unusual and interesting to see. It's very unusual that anyone who I know gets a it's very unusual that anyone in this kind of a story is using cryptocurrency, so it's really, really, really nice to see, and I really enjoy it. The safety glove situation is a very interesting plot thread, and it does go through the whole episode of why. Because obviously, why would you not have these safety gloves? And I really, really, really enjoy watching this episode of why with the gloves, because it does just add this really, really, really nice plot point that just keeps on going, and it's very enjoyable to watch. Oh, excuse me, I do apologise. The scene between the victim's fiancé in the car was very uncomfortable to watch when we see them falling apart and crying. It's very uncomfortable to watch scenes like that, and I'm actually presuming that she is a nurse, albeit not outright stated, but she is often seen in what looks like scrubs. I'm not sure whether it is or not, but it does look like scrubs, so I'm presuming that she is a nurse of some form. Darlene has become incredible at calming people down since becoming a police officer. It's very, very difficult for me to say that she's as good as some of the other people, i.e. Dwayne, JP, Vidal, Florence, of course. But obviously, she's better than Ruby, and that is something that we can just consider. No disrespect to Ruby, but she has just kind of been thrown and forgotten, because it's kind of like, I always like to use the spaghetti on the wall one. We're throwing spaghetti on the wall, and this one did not stick. Alright? The message on the blog was a great plot point, and I thought it was very, very enjoyable to watch. The power coming back was a lovely scene as well, especially the way that everyone applauds the fact that it's come back, especially with it being in such a public place as Catherine's bar, albeit Catherine unfortunately wasn't in this episode. But Catherine's bar is a very public location, and of course she is mayor, so there is some form of community with it. The messages on the blog some of them were quite uncomfortable to see, especially when we link it to the Rebecca situation from the last episode, from the last season, because obviously the inspector had a relationship with someone in the last season. Unfortunately, tried to have the inspector put in prison. And Rebecca was a very, very manipulative person and very difficult to watch a lot of the time. And that for me was very, very uncomfortable. And I don't know about everyone else, but I'm kind of glad that I'm kind of not glad that she's gone in a way. But I really hope they keep linking back to this point, especially the Darlene coming to talk was it's a very lovely scene between the eventual murderer and Darlene. It's a very interesting scene to watch. I quite enjoy scenes with Darlene because she has really become a great police officer and she's become really lovely to watch as a character. The lack of leads, however, is a very interesting situation to be in, especially with a show like this, where normally we're getting leads together, normally 3 to 4 leads at once. This one was a very interesting one with the lack of leads, and it added some great potential into the episode. So I'm looking down at my notebook in case you weren't clear, because I was like, looking down a lot. Yeah, I have a lot of notes from this episode. I've done 4 pages, or 3 and a bit pages worth. But yeah, the potential cheating was an interesting plot point as well, because it's a common one, but always an interesting one to watch, and always an interesting one to see whether the original wife and or husband knew or not. Because then we have this conversation of, well, if they knew, why? And it's always nice to see in a programme like this. It's not so great in things like dramas such as Casualty, which everyone knows I love to review, and it's really, really great. The breaking of the car was interesting and was clearly meant as like the inspector says, as a I'm presuming it's meant as a scare tactic more than anything else, but it's very unclear as to why. It kind of feels like one of those plot points that have been thrown out there. It's stuck to the wall because it's in the script, and then it's like peeling. I will be using the spaghetti analogy a lot. We're throwing things at the wall, they stick, some of them will peel off, some of them will stay. We shall see. The knowledge of the cryptocurrency was different to watch, especially because it's very uncommon where we have an intelligent wife. So this is great for women's rights and improvements throughout shows, TV shows, and all the things within the media. The chewing gum was an interesting scene, and I personally am presuming it links back to season 1, an episode that was set in a nunnery, and that episode contained the original inspector getting chewing gum on the bottom of his shoe and going around saying, "This nun has more bad habits, this nun has more bad habits." Well, if said nun has more bad habits, then it's on the bottom of his shoe. I think that's what the chewing gum references to, especially considering he then spends the rest of the episode trying to peel said chewing gum off the shoe. Yeah. The covering up of the power selling was interesting, especially coming from someone who works within the power plant. Always great to have people working within, but not with the victim, murderer, whatever. It's always nice to have things like that. The use of the necklace as the so-called wallet was very interesting, and I quite enjoyed it, and I've just written my page. But I did quite like it. It was a very interesting plot point to have. Sorry, I'm getting a bit cold, so I'm just going to scooch over here so you can hear me a bit more. The use of the camcorder was very interesting and very well done to show how the public can be of help in every murder investigation, which is important to you, because I don't know whether you're ever going to be caught up in a murder, and I highly hope that you don't, but I think this was more meant by the BBC to encourage people to come forward if in any situation they think they might have any details, and that to me is very important. The love triangle was a strong storyline. It's always more, but for me, love triangles are more useful in sitcoms, dramas, soaps, and, well, it's more useful for an ongoing story than for this. This really was a singular episode, but I think this is them throwing things at the wall, seeing if the audience like it, and seeing if they're going to stick with it and maybe introduce it into the main plot. It's unlikely in my opinion. I enjoyed watching the idea of suicide unfold. However, I do think it was a quick conclusion to jump to, in my opinion. I would never immediately jump to someone committing suicide. Don't know about you, and I don't think that's great for the character either. The returning of I'm presuming it's a fish necklace was interesting to watch. But the whole situation was quite strange to watch a lot of this episode, because it's a very different episode to what a lot of people are used to, and by having that difference does create this kind of I don't want to do new things kind of aspect. But I thoroughly enjoyed a lot of this, including this returning of items to victims and the police and things like that. I think it's really interesting to have, and I hope some of that will come in other episodes. The Yes, the sparking battery that's been on the inspector's table, I'm presuming it's battery, the fact that it's been sparking was so annoying and I hated it. I want to ask, why on God's green earth did anyone think it was a good idea to put that in? It was so irritating, albeit it does add to the plot. And that is something that is very good. A lot of people have been saying this, but they're not enjoying how, even now, in murder mysteries, now we try to go for more realism in stories, we're still having all the suspects gathered in, and I still love it, and I hope they don't change it. Obviously, they were trialing something in the last episode, but I don't think it worked myself, and I think they will stick with what they've been doing. It's the tried and tested formula. It worked for Agatha Christie, it worked for Murder, She Wrote. Sorry, it took me a while, and it's working for this, so I think they'll keep it. The stealing of the money was interesting to watch. This is now, of course, coming into the suspect gathering at the end. Excuse me. And I think this was a really true, story situation, because I feel like this is something that would happen in real life. And that is why I love this show. It mixes things that would happen in real life with this almost fantasy-esque element, even though it's not really a fantasy story. The coming clean of how much makes a very, very great motive for a lot of people within the group, and very, very much something that I loved. I love the idea of how much is the cryptocurrency worth? How much, and who knows? Because that is a very, very strong motive to have. The change of the time of death was lovely to learn about, and very uncommon in murder mystery stories, because we don't have time as murder mystery people to sit there going, oh, I wonder if that's the actual time of death. We get our time of death on a piece of paper that gets read out in the detective's office, and we just take it as canon, because it has to be canon, because Otherwise, what on earth are we doing? So, you know, it's very interesting to get that, and it's very uncommon, and I really do hope that other shows do it. And the power cut from water does just remind people, because so many people have spill water and do all this around electronics. Please, please, please. Drinks. I have them in one of these cups that have like a twisty cap. For safety, because if I spill that, yes, some will come out, but nowhere near as much as if it was open. You know, all this is kind of protective stuff, and that is very important. And it's very important for a show that's going to be on free television as well. Having the arrest from Darlene was very lovely to watch, and a little bit uncomfortable as well, because it has this era of, well, we've watched this. We knew that these two knew each other. That's very uncomfortable to watch. The person who they knew be arrested by them, and that is lovely. The inspector calling empathy a strength is very lovely to watch, and I think that's very important to see as well, because there are so many people who say empathy is a weakness, especially in policing. So it's nice to see that they're doing this whole empathy is a strength. Empathy is good, and that is what I love. And finally, the romance online is something we can really, well and truly, look forward to seeing in future episodes. That's all the notes I have made. But I will say there is one thing that I'm thinking now. Oh my gosh, that is so close to my face. Sorry. There is one thing that I have seen in this episode that I've not written down for some reason. But the fact that the inspector had all this build-up about thinking it was Rebecca on the system, and it wasn't, I think that's really good, and I think he will forever become very paranoid about who he talks to, especially with the incident, as I'm going to call it, and I now feel like I'm too close to the camera. So, yes, for anyone who's wondering, I am sat in bed, I am cold, it has been a long day, don't believe me, please, it's warm in here. Okay, let's tilt this down a bit. Okay, I have my iPad. I don't think you're going to be able to see my iPad, but this has things like from other videos. This is my iPad spreadsheet. Let me just... Yeah, no, you can't see anything of what it says on there, but basically what it says is the basics from other episodes of things like how good the cast were, how good the costumes were, what links to other seasons were, whatever, and what I think in terms of a score rating. And I like to compile all these sorts of things together. Alright, let's see whether I can get it to lean down so I can relax a bit. Now, the cast I scored a 7, and I obviously scored it a 7 because they are a great cast. Returning cast are great. We've seen them in so many episodes before, and of course Selwyn is becoming so iconic. I'm just really ready for a bit of a change from some of them. The costume design I've given an 8 because I've really enjoyed it. I just think there could have been some more stronger moments because some of them were a little bit weak. Characters I've given a 7 because there were some good characters in this, and obviously we've got the iconic ones, and we've got some people who are now coming up in memes and coming up in TikTok and things like that, and that's so nice to see become iconic characters. And of course the characters specific for this episode were lovely. The plot I've given a 7. Okay, I can't deal with this. The plot I've given a 7 because I thought it could have been stronger in places. Well, it felt very experimental, this episode, all like, let's throw everything we want to try in this season on one, and see what happens. And that's why I've given it that. The villains I've given an 8, and I've given it an... Sorry. The villains I have given an 8. And by villains, I mean the murderer. It was a very strong murderer with a very strong motive. The means were great, and the opportunity was at an unexpected point as well. So that's very good. The rewatchability, I have given a 6. Because, personally, I don't think this episode, with all of its twists and turns, will be very good to watch again compared to some of the others. And then availability, I've left at a 5 because I still don't know what it's like in other countries. So if you could please let me know that in the comments. Alright, that means this episode has scored an average of 6.85. Well, sorry, 6.86 if we're rounding properly. But that there, believe it or not, is the end of this week's episode. So, comment question of this episode, because I want to see how many of you will stick to the end. Do we think that we will be getting a new inspector anytime soon? I personally don't think we'll get a new inspector until the end of... But I don't think we'll get a new inspector for a good while. But I'd like to know what you think. And as always, I think you should watch one of the videos on the screen, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.